Before my episode with Josie Long, I just wanted to say that tickets are available for my show at the Glasgow Comedy Festival. It is on the 12th of March at Van Winkle West End, which is a great venue where I've done several shows before, and it's just a fantastic room and loads of great people do their shows there, loads of great local acts. So it's on the 12th of March at Van Winkle West End, and I will put a link to tickets in the description. The show is called Spring Summer 2025, but it is a work in progress of my next show, Welcome Home. That's just maybe very confusing, but I always call my shows at the Glasgow Comedy Festival Spring Summer whatever year it is, because I often don't really know if it's working towards a solo show or it's me just trying stuff out. About half the tickets are gone already, but if you want to come and see what I've been working on and how this podcast has informed the material, I'd love to see people there. So my very special guest today is Josie Long. I was very excited to have her on the show because I bumped into her at a few gigs and asked her about it, and she was kind enough to come on. She's lived in Glasgow for about 4 years now, as we'll talk about. And it's a shorter episode, which some of you are probably very glad about. I don't know whether to try and make them shorter, but I just like taking my time with a lot of the people who come on, and just sort of, I really enjoy finding the conversation. I don't talk nearly as much in this episode as I do in other episodes, because Josie just totally understood the premise of the show and just did not need any prompts, and I found what she had to say really interesting, and I was just trying to really listen. It's kind of half and half writing and her hometown, because a lot of people are working on shows at the moment, but she's been working on a show for a while, as have I. So we really just got into that, and she's somebody who's also, it's no surprise that she got what the premise of the show was, because she's a person who I think values sincerity and intentionality. And it's obviously a person who did a show called Trying is Good. So I really enjoyed it, and I hope if you're just finding the podcast through this episode, I hope you really enjoy it. And I have to start saying this sort of stuff, but please subscribe to the channel and like the video. I guess maybe it helps other people find it, and you'll get notified when new episodes are uploaded to the channel. And also my special of my previous show, Welcome Back from 2022, is on there, and that maybe doesn't sound like much, but it is an hour of stand-up, and I'm really proud of the show, and I think the show will be quite different. But I think it's I'm still feeling me. I'm still feeling myself as I'm writing it. But I am enjoying how different when I think back to my previous show. I really enjoy. I'm like, oh wow, it is different, and I'm quite proud of that. However it is executed, I don't know, we'll see. Josie's also doing a couple of work in progresses of her new show, one in Manchester and a couple in Edinburgh at Monkey Barrel in February and March, and I will put a link to tickets to those shows in the description as well. So yeah, thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy my conversation with Josie Long. My name is John Agasild. I'm a stand-up comedian living in Glasgow in Scotland. But I haven't always lived here. I was born and raised in Aberdeen in the northeast. I'm working on my next solo stand-up show, and I found myself writing and talking a lot about both of these cities. So I wanted to interview some other comedians about their hometowns, find out what they're like, why they left, why they stayed, and what home means to them. This is the Welcome Home podcast. Just a bit of a... Do you employ an elf on the shelf in your house?
We see it as a symptom of surveillance culture in my house.
Exactly. Well, that's what it is. Well, I was hoovering and I thought about that, and I thought about that's exactly what it is. So I have an elf on that shelf because my sister-in-law brought one.
If you're an adult, sure, bit of fun.
And my sister-in-law brought one. She stayed here for Christmas in 2020, and then I was like, "Oh, that thing's horrible."
I hate the face. Are we podcasting
It's very
this?
old school. Yeah.
podcast
It's very old
Yes.
school. Like, I don't like those old Santas that have the tiny glasses.
No.
That, you know, in some shops there'll be a red Santa, but then he'll be all silver or he'll be all gold. Like, you know, his
And
outfit
and
is.
it'll, you press a button, it'll sort of...
Yeah, it could do that, or it could just be stationary or something. But
No.
I was looking up at the elf on the
It's
shelf there,
American
and
as well.
it's American, but it is a placebo for surveillance culture.
Yeah, it's telling you
It's-
to bring a cop into your own head.
Yes,
It's
yes,
saying, welcome the cop in your own head.
yes. It's
Which is, to be fair, sometimes I do say to my daughter, you have to do the right thing even when people aren't looking. So maybe I'm also inviting the cop into her head. But that cop is Jesus
you have to
Christ.
defund the cop in your head.
Defund the cop in your head.
Yes.
Yeah, you don't have to kill them necessarily.
No,
That's for
no.
later on.
Yeah,
Defund.
Yeah.
No,
But
also-
I was thinking about. I was like, what is it? And I was like, it is. Yeah, it is surveillance culture.
It is, and it's sort of putting a lot of added labour onto mostly mums to like think of some creative idea. Yeah, I think it's too much. I don't do it. But then I think I'm so contrarian sometimes that I feel like if anything feels mainstream, I'm like, oh no, not for me, no. But what my daughter has is last Christmas, for her Christmas present, she asked for a magic box that whatever she asked for, she would write a letter and it would be in the box. And I was like, well, I'm sure Santa can do that. So then I found this box that says magic box on it, printed with the name. So I wrote Leonie's magic box. And then she writes letters to this elf. And then I write the letters back. But it's been really upsetting because...
The whole year.
The whole year. But quite often she'll write a letter and I won't notice for a while. So she'll be like, I wrote to Groblin and Groblin didn't write back. And I'm like, I just wrote back to her from Groblin. And I'm not entirely comfortable with it because it's creating a fiction. And so that's... Oh no.
That's Groblin.
It's Groblin. This is the thing Scottish people say, postman. Like they put the emphasis on the man.
Postman.
So when he comes on the buzzer, we go, postman. And I'm like, I love it.
Or I'd say
postman.
I'd say postie.
Postie.
I'd say postie.
Yeah,
More up north, I'd be more likely to say postie.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Oh, yeah,
the
Groblin, yeah.
letters and it's very clever. It's quite clever in a way to be, because it's sort of like you get a wish. I wish for a million wishes.
Yeah, and I was
type.
proud of her. And it's meant that she's had little presents throughout the year, but quite often she'll ask for things that are impossible. Like she asked for a magic slide that took her from her room to school.
Stop asking for magic things
Yeah.
for more that
Give you
enable more magic things,
Yeah.
please.
Exactly. So Groblin had to write back and be like, I'm so sorry, the council won't let me. The bosses at the council have been very, very clear that it's against the regulations. And I'm just worried because I feel like at some point she's going to be like, was this you? So I think what I'm going to have to do is at the end of this year be like, the box only works for a year. But I should have said that at the start. Or she might lose interest. I feel bad because I don't know what I think about lying to kids, even in a fun, magical way. But at the same time, it's been so lovely. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to do a good job. but
You're
I don't
I'm
bloody
sure
know
you're
how.
doing a great job. I'm sure.
Really?
But it's just having to. You've created this thing
Monster.
for this monster for yourself, where you're having to impart, council planning permissions and terms and conditions of wishes onto your child.
It's
It's
so
just
bad to be like, oh yes, there's a reason this is impossible. But I remember that when I was a kid, I really, really yearned for like magic, supernatural things. I was so desperate to have like some sort of godly intervention, you know, some miraculous occurrence.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for coming today and speaking to me. The first question, because I'm trying to use this as a way for me to help me write my next show, is I just ask how,
It'd be so
how
funny
you
if
write.
the show was called Cunts I Met.
Cunts I Met. Cunts I Met.
You know, bad people I sat with.
Is how do you write, and I mean that in a very literal sense. Is it by hand or typing? Because I've seen you at gigs with a notebook, and you work from a notebook sometimes on the stage at New Material Nights. So yeah, how do you write?
I feel like I have two states of being. I have like just getting on with it, and then I have switched on my noticing radar, you know, and I feel like when I'm really in a more writing state, then I just try to keep really open the whole time to any ideas I have, and then what I tend to do is write them on the notes app in my phone just to remember, and then get them into the notebook as soon as possible.
Yeah.
And then it'll be just like a little idea, and then I tend to write on stage a lot of the time. So I'll go on stage with, I'm going to burp, and I just want you to know it's nothing to do with, pardon me. I go on stage and I, just give it a shot. What was that? So the most recent idea I had was the other day I realised that the thumbs up reaction to a text is the most insulting thing in the world. Like, it's so insulting. And I was having a very, very serious conversation with a dear friend of mine who's going through something really sad. And I said something really, like, meaningful to her, like, oh, don't worry, like, these things are really hard, but you just got to walk through it, you know. And then a thumb up. I was like, a thumb up? And like, so I thought of that, and then I just went on stage and just mucked about with it, and it was fun. And so that's how I do it. But I also have a few different, I think, you know, when you're writing, you've got different textures of what you're putting in, eh? So you think that there's a subject you want to talk about. That's obviously much, much bigger than just a silly observation about that, you know? And so I sort of collect these little ones, but then with bigger writing. So I'm currently writing a show about extinct charismatic prehistoric megafauna. Like everyone else, you know. Although I say that, and I'm genuinely worried that someone else is going to do something similar, because it's so specific that if there were to, you'd be like, fuck. Like, you know when they made 2 biopics of Truman Capote's life in the same year?
Yes.
And you'd be like, what? What? You know?
Yeah.
And there'd be some person being like, my show's called Saber-Tooth Tiger. And I'm like, fuck you!
Yeah.
But with that, I've been trying to write in a more, like, diffuse manner, like... I'm trying to do things. So I did an art class because I thought, if I can just be chill enough, which is hard for me, to just go, this is going to improve my work in ways I can't tell yet.
Yes.
You know? And so I've been researching.
But you've always drawn.
Have always drawn badly, and I'm trying to get back to it. But I'll tell you something interesting. I did this art class. I loved it. The teacher was amazing. I found it really enjoyable, and it was quite cathartic for me because I realised that I'd always wanted to study art, but I had to stop at 13 because my school didn't let me in. Then I literally set up a charity to help people study arts. And it took me till I was 40 to be like, oh yeah, that was me. I wasn't allowed to study art. Because I was like, people need to study art, you know. People, you know. And I did it, and it was useful. But what I'm starting to realise is when I do it, I love it. And I suppose if I keep practicing, I could get better. But I honestly feel like with stand-up, I have something that is the song of my heart that I've been doing for 30 years. And nothing else really compares to that. Like, I wrote short stories, and that does compare to it, and I do love that. But I've been doing that since I was a teenager. But, like, actual physical making art, I enjoy it, but it's just not my deep thing.
It's for you.
Well, and also for the stage sometimes, but like...
Yeah.
It's just not quite... It's just not my deep thing.
Yeah.
And it's so weird because I think all my life I've been like, you need to draw more. You're not drawing enough. You're not good enough at drawing. And now I'm actually doing it. I'm like, maybe I don't need to draw more. Like, I'm not like, I like it and I will keep doing it, but it's just funny. And I think it's funny, I suppose, when you found the thing that you do love.
Yes.
It's sort of great, but it's like you're in a sort of different place to maybe people who haven't, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I think like I understand what you mean, because I used to love drawing, and I used to love drawing and painting when I was young, and I did it in school, but it's not like this isn't the tool with which I will like express myself.
Exactly.
This is helping me understand like the language of art in a very basic
Yes.
square, circle, triangle way or something.
It's some kind of expression. It's
It
a way
is,
to make.
yeah.
But I guess for me, it feels more like cooking. It's like I love doing this,
Yeah.
but it's like, it's not like stand-up, which is like my lifelong friend.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I've been trying to like research more for my shows, go to places, read more, because I've just come out of, I've got a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old, and basically a kid's infancy is 3 years.
Yeah.
So I've basically had both my kids through infancy, and we're just coming out of that. And in that time, I did write a show about climate change and having a baby, and then I wrote another show about protest largely. But both of them were like almost real, like seat of the pants stuff. It was like, anything's happened to me, I'll just use it. The first show was like 30 minutes of it was about giving birth to my first daughter and stuff. And so it's felt really like I didn't have the scope to try to write a broader show, you know?
Okay.
And like, and I'm saying all this shit, like, A, who gives a shit? And B, it's probably still going to be shit. But
No.
do you know what I mean? Like, for me, personally, with my practice or whatever, it's nice to feel in a slightly different state. I also love to do a big spider diagram.
Elaine Malcolmson was talking to me about this.
Does she do
That she likes she uses spider diagrams for breaking the news when she's like writing on breaking
that's
the
a good
news.
idea.
And I was like, and
I'm
there
always
is-
on the back foot for breaking the news. I'm like, what's funny? I've got 24 hours. Donald Trump.
your mission, if you choose to accept, you have 24 hours to come up with satirical.
Oh God! 1 in 3 Scots. 1 in 3 Scots.
1 in 3 Scots report. Yeah. Yeah, she was talking about that, and what I am going to try to do is take away some little techniques of people and try and replicate that for myself. So diagrams, I think, would be helpful.
Spider diagrams are good because, so what I do sometimes, and actually haven't done one for this show yet, partly because I think I've just done too much now, and it's like, oh, I've got too much. Not good.
Because the spiders back then were massive.
Yes, they fucking were. But to be fair, if I had a big A2 piece of paper, which I do from my sketching, I could do a big one.
Can I actually? I will delete this. When you were doing your work, one of your work in progresses, which I saw.
Oh, you saw the shit one. It was such a bad gig.
I really enjoyed
dig
it.
a hole in the ground.
I really enjoyed it. You had 2 people right in front of you, I think, that were sucking some energy.
And it was a small. So this is the problem: is Glasgow's a small city, and historically, I would come here once a year, have the best gig in my life, and now I'm trying to see if people will see a work in progress once a month, and it's like, no, the audience does not exist for that. So I'm like begging 15 people a month, and everyone's like, ugh. And I'm like, I know, it'll be good, and I feel like I'm actively shedding fans in this beautiful
You're like,
city.
I'll just move there, then I'll have the best gigs of my life
and it's
all
like,
the time.
It's one of those things, isn't it? It's like you cross the Rubicon. I don't even know. I feel like there is a good metaphor for it, but I can't think of it. It's like once it's real, and it's lost.
Mm-hmm.
But that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
I would rather live in the greatest city on earth, in a beautiful place, than come here once a year.
Yeah. We'll get into that. But you know how you were talking about, were you trying to compare, maybe it was just in the moment on stage, were you trying to, you had your visual aids of these megafauna.
Yeah.
And you were did you compare one of them to a vehicle?
Oh yeah, I'm trying to do that with a few of them. That's the thing I want to build.
Oh, sorry?
So basically, apart
My question was, are you going to draw the vehicles?
Yes.
Good, okay, cool.
Thank you, I'm going to write that down. Oh, yeah. Oh, we're getting absolute... Thank you, it's a good tip. Yes, I'm definitely...
Because it'd be funny to see, with respect, you as a anti-car person drawing
Spending
vehicles.
hours drawing vehicles. Oh, my God, he's giving me gifts for free. Yeah, a bit of the show.
Just because for the...
Well,
Not exactly to scale, obviously, but if you have a
No, I'd love to.
transit next to a
Glyptodon. You should check out Glyptodons. Also, there's one that I've seen recently, which is Chalicotheris, I think, which is it's basically akin to a gigantic gorilla, but with the head of a kind of horse zebra. It's astonishing, and I couldn't draw it because I was like, my head cannot believe this is real. I can't do it justice.
I'm sorry I interrupted. I just wanted to say about the drawing.
No, I loved it, and that was genuinely so helpful. I think so. You do a spider diagram. For me, I do it to kind of start a show, where I'm like, I know quite often when I'm writing a show, I know often the title. Weirdly, I know the vibe, I know the theme, and then I sort of try to get everything I'm thinking about already and every idea I've got onto a chart just so I can see how they relate. But if you're writing a piece of material, I think spider diagrams are great because you try it really, I'm burping a lot, I'm sorry. It really physically gives you multiple angles. You can literally look at multiple angles as you try and approach it, and that's good.
Yeah, because for me, I think sometimes I go at it with one from an angle, and then sometimes just to get it from why is this not clicking to when can it click is just a very, very small pivot.
Or even just allowing yourself to go, okay, I've tried that, let's step back and start again.
Yeah.
Do you know what as well? I think I'm not somebody who's very able to be technical in joke writing. That doesn't mean I can't write jokes, but I mean, some people will be like, well, what
this is a contrast and compare.
Yes, or like, well, what I do is I take two lists and I join the different bits for exercise. You know, some people do these like dry exercises, and I like that. And I always say to myself when I'm writing a show, right, what we're going to do is take each bit and we're really going to hone it like a joke writer, you know. But for me, I think the pleasure is doing it on stage, and quite often I will try out multiple endings for a joke on stage. Like I have this one bit that just never ever ever works, and I'm certain there's a joke in it. I've tried 20 jokes, never coming to me, and I'm like, I know I'm going to have to give it up or try something completely different, but it's very fun in my head to be like, okay, here's that bit coming up, get ready because we're trying option 37, you know. And I sometimes do that on tour, like especially if it's only one small gag, and like I'll just be like, we will keep doing this until the joke is found. And I would say 80% of the time the joke is found.
Nice.
But unfortunately the joke is found 100 shows in.
Yeah.
You're like, well, we found the joke.
So I'm glad that you brought up, you know, work in progresses, and, you know, you talked about your previous shows. Can you talk or give somebody advice, somebody who or other people out there, because within keeping in mind that, you know, there is a culture of the Fringe is an annual show, the pleasures, but also only two. Okay. The pleasures, but also the challenges of taking more than a year to write something.
Oh, it's so interesting. Oh, firstly, thank you for asking me this stuff. I love to talk about it, and it's so nice. So when I first started writing stand-up shows, I did my first one when I was 24, and then I did 3 on the trot. And it was literally do the show, tour the show, go to Melbourne, write a new show. And that was very, very intense as a schedule. And I think I learnt a lot and I improved a lot as a comedian. But I also think my third show I thought was really good. But maybe at the time. It's so funny. Like recently I've been really like trying to be a cheerleader for myself and being like, I think my stuff is good. But the third show, it literally got 5, 4, 3 and 2-star reviews on the same night. I had like a press bonanza one night. And then it came out the next day and I was like, wow, a 5-star, oh, a 2-star. It was, and the 5-star review was so nice. And the 2-star review was like, everyone thinks this person is the next good female comedian, but they're lying to themselves. She's terrible. It was so brutal. It was like, this is the fucking Emperor's New Clothes. She's fucking shit. And it was like, oh. And the reason I'm saying that is because I do think that if you're on that punishing schedule, sometimes you are running on fumes somewhat. And I've definitely seen a couple of stand-up shows in Edinburgh of people where I've thought, oh, actually, this didn't need to happen. It wouldn't have been... Oh, I'm going to cough again, excuse me. This is my water. I'm going to drink my water. But I think it's really...
Juice as well, sorry. I'm just saying juice like...
You got a fizzy juice?
Like your daughter does.
Just... I said diluting juice, but she does this thing where she kind of puts on a bad Scottish accent. So she was like, diluting juice. And I was like, you don't need to do that, honey. You don't need to do that. Don't tell people you can talk Scottish. Don't do it. Honey, don't do it.
So yeah, sometimes you can see where people are running on fumes or this is maybe...
But it's complicated, I suppose, because the longer I go into this, the more I'm like, of all the people on earth, the person who takes my work the most seriously is me, and that will always be the way. Especially with stand-up, it burns up, you know. So actually, you're allowed to go, why am I doing this? And if your goal is just to be an athlete who's been on stage a lot, then I guess it's fine. And as long as you feel at the time you're trying your best, fine. But yeah, that third show, Stuart Lee, my comedy hero, said to me, oh, I guess it's okay to have a slack year. Can you fucking imagine? The fucking... He wasn't being nasty, he was trying to be kind. But yeah. So I'm being really long-winded and I don't mean to be.
No.
But for me, the time since then, I did 3 on the trot, I took a year off. I did 3 on the trot. I ill-advisedly took a year off. Then I did 1. And then I took a year, did 1.
Because it's
And
impossible
then I
to
have
be like,
kids.
well, this will be my slack year, so I'll take that off. Because you're like, well, then I might come back and I don't know, whatever. If it's the whatever the calendar, if the Gregorian calendar, there's 2 slack years in a row. Who knows?
This is
Who's
it.
to know?
This is it. You have no control over how good your ideas are that year. You just don't have control over these things. So you can try really hard to marshal it and to pretend you've got a plan and shit. And this is something I think I'm learning.
Like 3 in a break and 3 in a...
Yeah. Or like, no, I think next year will be really good. But it's sort of in the lap of the gods. Like, things happen in your life. The world changes. You know, all kinds of things happen. So whatever you try, you're kind of just creating a fictitious thing.
Yeah.
To like pretend is real. But I think... in my experience, there's been a couple of times in my life where I've taken kind of 2 years to write a show. I wrote one called Cara Josephine 10 years ago that was about my niece and it was about my ex a little bit, barely about him. It was mainly about me. I'm saying that because like some of our mutual acquaintances have been
Is that on
"You wrote a show
YouTube?"
about him. No, it's not. It was on Amazon for a while. It's
That's
Soho Theatre.
In my...
There's one on
yeah.
YouTube called Romance and Adventure from 12 years ago, which does mention a different ex.
Cara Josephine is one that sticks out in my head for some reason as a title. If I'm like trying to remember shows and stuff like that.
I was really proud of it, but I took 2 years to write that, or I took kind of. Was it even 2 years? Sorry, give me a sec. No. I think I actually know. I started writing shows with 3 months basically to write them. Pardon me, and then with that one, I started in January, and that was a big deal for me. And I couldn't believe I'd had more time to build it up. But with this show I'm writing, I started it January this year. And I was going to go to Melbourne, but I'm not anymore. So basically, it's going to be 18 months to write it, more. And what I would say is, sometimes I think, oh, this show's going to be so much richer for it. Sometimes I think, fuck, since I last wrote a show, I've written a book and this is too much. I'm trying to put too much into this show. Not necessarily for the good. And then other times I think, will this show feel dead? In a way that, like, if you have 3 months, it's so alive. Partly because you're fraught, and partly because it's like exactly of that moment. Because I really do believe that.
It's like, well, you can't take 18 months to, as you know, you can't choose to take 18 months to have a baby.
No,
it's 9 months,
it's 9
whether
months,
you
and
like
that's
it or
what
not.
is. And the baby fucking comes. So I think it's complicated.
Would you take 18 months to have a baby if you...
No. Being pregnant is the fucking worst. And anyone who tells you otherwise is a liar, or they're like 25. Being pregnant sucks.
So, yeah, with the 3 months, it's all systems go and it feels really alive. But if you take longer, I had like a month or so earlier this year where I just had like a couple of gigs where there was a couple of, you know, you're trying stuff out and you have a what the fuck am I talking about moment with a routine, but that can poison a show. kind, you know, a little bit sometimes,
Do
where
you
you
know
can be
what
like,
you mean?
what am I talking about for the whole thing?
But my advice here would be, don't worry.
Yes,
You know,
yeah.
because it comes apart, it comes back together. And then that's where I'd say, actually, no matter how slow you are to write a show, and this is what I think is going to happen for me, really, it'll come together the month before you put it on.
Mm-hmm.
So really, no matter where you are along the journey, where you are that month before will also be quite pivotal.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think it's funny too for me because I tend to write shows that are like, here's what I've been up to this year.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want that show to be I don't want this show to be that. I want this show to just be like a mad thing.
Mm.
And I feel like I haven't started writing it yet, even though I have an hour. And so it's weird because I feel like, is it going to be that in July it becomes, here's where I'm at, you know? But I don't know. It's so interesting. And I think writing a show is always like a journey of like, where am I at? Who am I now? Well, how can I say things?
Why is this subject speaking to me?
Yes. And
Yeah.
why is it worth people's time?
Yes.
I also think Stuart Lee, again, told me that a show should be a question that's resolved. My stand-up shows, if I transcribe them, are only 5,000 words long, more or less. That's actually nothing. It's so short. And so I actually don't have that much
Yeah.
to put in. It's not the same as writing a novel, you know? A novel's 10 times.
Yeah. Are you saying that you think there's too much in the show because as you were writing the novel, you were...
It was only short
there was
stories
like,
that I wrote.
oh, that would be good for a stand-up. Oh, that would be good for stand-up.
No, I just
as you were
think-
writing the show, or...
No, I just think I'm bringing literally everything to the plate at the moment.
Uh-huh.
And so it's just all coming to this. And probably what I should do is go write a story about that bit. Because at the moment, the show is about these animals, parenting, extinction, climate change, me getting older, me worrying about that, death, things ending. You know, it's all these things. And actually, I think a show probably can't handle that much.
They're all, yeah, branches off the spider diagram
Yes, exactly.
that are relevant and that are linked, yeah.
Yeah, but maybe if and also I suppose as well, hopefully I'm going to take it on tour and then it can be 2 hours. So that's quite complicated because in my head I'm sort of like, can I squirrel that away for the first half and then this be the second half, you know, and like how to do that. That
Tricky.
becomes an extra bit.
Tricky. Well, it's enjoyable to. It's very enjoyable to have seen the bits in isolation and seeing it come together. And
What are your worries for you writing your show? Like, what advice do you feel you need? 'Cause if I can help, I
no,
will.
it's just kind of just stick with it, and
Yeah.
you knew that it was good in the first place. And sometimes it's tricky because if you're writing a show for how I feel is that I've been writing the show for a while. There's grand ideas and there's sort of emotional touchstones to it that are not tangible and not on paper,
Yes.
but they're at the start of the journey and they're kind of speckled throughout. You don't feel them if a bit falls on its face on a new material night. So it's like how to go back to those, how to go back to that sort of that emotional or mental or artistic space to draw inspiration or just be reinvigorated. Yeah, it's sometimes it's like having and that's different to in the writing of the show having a clear North Star by which to, okay, that bit is not moving it forward, that bit is not moving it forward. But that emotional touchstone of a show being about homes or a show being about megafauna and extinction and all that comes with that and all that hometowns come with, that is also the thing that inspires you to write a bit that doesn't work, and it's tricky to go between the two, but
Also, it's
that's
scary. I think it's a scary process because you start going like, is this going to be terrible? Is this going to be really boring for people? Like, have I worked too long on this? Have I just been being weird on my own and bringing it to the thing? But the truth is, no, you'll be fine.
yeah,
And then also what's fun and shit and stupid about stand-up is, you know, you might get on stage, fall over and then realise that you falling over is the bit, you know? Like there's so many things like that where you're like I've done it where I was going to read this really meaningful quote and then I realised that actually that wasn't the bit is me like taking the piss out of that and stuff. And it's such a funny space, especially having written stuff that was slightly more serious in the last couple of years. It's such a funny space to be like, oh yeah, but everything here needs to be fucked with. You know, you can't be, you can't actually be as earnest as you might want to be.
It's interesting that you quoted Stuart Lee there, that a show should be an answer to a question, because for some reason I picked up from the library Virginia Woolf's A Room of One's Own, and I started reading that, and she was saying in an essay it should just be an opinion. It can't possibly be she's not saying a solo stand-up show should be.
She's like, Shirley doesn't know shit. Let me tell you this.
That she was saying it could only be opinion. It couldn't possibly be fact. But I think that with
it's the same thing, I think.
Right.
But you're just coming to your opinion on a question.
Yeah, which
but
feels...
as a stand-up, you pretend that it's everything.
Yeah, but I think that with different...
Although I have a theory about this. I think male stand-ups in general, or male socialised stand-ups, tend to be more categorical on stage. Male stand-ups will come out and be like, the world is like this. Whereas maybe I'm just the person, I come out and I'm like, I personally have done this, and sometimes I think this, you know? I'm a lot less like, men are this. I'm like, I did this. You know?
I have been falling into the former category sometimes recently, and that it can be in like a quest to try and make things universal.
Yeah,
but then there's
tricky.
the personal is the universal.
Yeah.
The more specific you get with it, and then there's nothing worse than if you're in front of people and saying, you know, when you do this, and people are like, no.
Yeah,
and
you
then
just have to be like, I did this,
and then people identify with you as an individual, because it's not like an entire audience are going to look up on stage and see an entire audience and say, that's us, because they have to individually say, that's me.
But then I sometimes have it, and this happened last night. I was talking to Conor O'Toole, local legend, great comedian, great filmmaker, and I was saying to them about how the thumbs up thing, I was really happy to try out that little observation last night. And I said, and it felt like people really identified with it. And they went, or they laughed because it was so absurd that you care about that. And I was like, damn. And then I thought, oh, that probably happens a lot where I'm like, finally, I'm relating to other human beings. And the other human beings are like, this weirdo's so funny. And I remember that feeling a lot when I first started out, like, I would get reviews that were like, it's like a nutter on the bus. And I'd be like, what? I'm just talking seriously here. Or it would be like people being like, she doesn't realise she's not doing it right at all. I'd be like, thanks, babe.
Yeah, I think that what's... Because there have been moments in my notebook where I'm writing and I'm like, no, put I instead.
Yeah,
put
100%.
I. People will... That's easier linguistically to say, and it seems more like you're being yourself instead of saying we...
And it's hard to feel like you have a right to be there unless you're a maniac.
Yeah.
And especially I feel the older I get, the more I'm like, does anyone give a shit? Like, especially not being somebody who's like, I'm not a big TV name, right? And I sometimes think people think this person's been going for ages, like they must be shit, why should I listen to them, or something like that. And so in your head you have to be like, no, I think people should listen to what I'm saying. And I think that'll only get harder. Like maybe when you're 80 actually it'll be like, these pricks are gonna love this, you know. But I feel like it's like a wrestling journey where you're sort of trying to go, no, I think I'm allowed to occupy this space actually.
Yeah.
And I think it's all right for me to say that what I have to say is worth it.
Yeah. I think that, and it's... I was going to say it may be easier to have like something factual, like a answering a question in regards to extinction and climate change, but whereas I'm trying to talk about, you know, oh, what do I think of this place? That's not factual, that's more opinion. But
my real question is going to be, I think, how do you cope with this? How do we cope with living through an extinction event? Which I think is basically my question all the time, is like, how do you keep going? And that's the scary thing as well, because maybe the question you're asking is the same question you asked in your last two shows, really. You know, because maybe each of us only
it is. It's a third. Questions. It's the third in like a show about identity. That is it. That is it. That is it.
Who am I?
That is it. Yeah, that is it. I'm just trying to get that out of my system. So
What's the spacing been between your shows?
Oh, very long. Well, the first show was in 2017, which was very ambitious and really bad. And
sure it was bad.
but it was like me throwing everything that I possibly could, and then I was like,
Classic
I'm gonna take some time and just get better. And then I got much better in my own opinion, and then did a show in 2022,
Nice.
and then I'm gonna do the next show next year.
3 years. That's a good time.
Yeah, there's the right for me writing around the around the subject for a long time, and then closer to it, it'll be like, well, what is this? And there's maybe 20 minutes of stuff that are like, well, no, this is not. This is not relevant.
And it's so
Ask yourself,
frustrating.
truly, is this, or have you just, is this just a tangent with a story or an observation that seems
And also,
adjacent to
yes.
it? And adjacent is maybe not
I don't want
enough.
adjacent. Or you kind of go, if I'm putting this energy in, is that really the energy I want for the show? Is that really the little bit of vibe? Yeah, it's so hard, especially when you've written it. And
If you
it's
hold
good.
yourself to, if you're holding yourself to account into a certain
Trying to.
standard, to be like, well, yeah, did you meet the
You don't want
brief that you?
a second where you're like, I have to put this bit in,
Yeah.
And I definitely felt my last show, there was about 2 bits where I was like, I just need this bit in here. It's not good enough. And I'll be like a bit cringy about it because it felt a bit obvious.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there's okay sometimes, a bit of giving the audience respite.
Yeah, I put a bad bit. I don't even mean bad.
Not a bad
just
bit,
mean
I
like
mean-
a fucking cheesy bullshit obvious thing that just doesn't feel good.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, sometimes, yeah, but then sometimes I'm like, well, this would go nicely here because this would be a break from this. But I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Something that never something you don't stand by.
Oh God, no.
Yeah.
But I also think I've been writing some bits, and some of them are about like aging as a woman, feeling worried about being a woman in showbiz, etc., etc. And I like talking about it, but I sort of think it's probably not this show, and it's frustrating to me.
That's really nice, though. That's good to.
But maybe that
Have.
could be the first half of the tour. Maybe be like, "Hi guys, I'm falling apart." Anyway, so I'm actually not.
Where were you born?
Oh, Sidcup. Isn't that a terrible name? Sidcup Queen Mary Hospital, closed since.
Okay.
They said we can't do better than this. Shut it down. Queen Mary's Hospital.
Sidcup.
Sidcup.
I've heard of Sidcup. Where is it?
It's in southeast London. It's kind of a suburb. It's quite dreary in lots of ways. So I was born in Sidcup. I grew up in St Mary Cray in a place which is called like Poverest is like where I was from, where I grew up. And I always say Orpington. I've always said I'm from Orpington.
There's something about Orpington from you saying that in your stand-up that rings in my...
Orpington in Kent.
Yes. Yes. I have family friends that live in Kent, Maidstone.
Oh, my sister lived in Maidstone for a long time.
Yeah.
This is where I just
So
I don't want to be rude
but
about Kent
Orpington
online.
ring. But so I'm like, okay, well, Kent. I'm no, but there's something that, yeah, I feel like you've maybe said that in several shows that you've been
so
like
all
Orpington in Kent, and
Yeah.
I'm like,
I'm so sorry.
it's squirreled away.
But this is bad because my school was in Orpington. We did move when I was 14 more into Orpington, to this flat that I honestly hated. It was some of the worst living. But where I grew up, it was a little house in what is St Mary Cray. And now I'm older, I'm a bit like, I should have said St Mary Cray because St Mary Cray is actually makes more sense for who I am. I know it sounds weird. It's like, it's not like Orpington is quite funny. Like, there's really, really rich places in Orpington. There's this thing called Farnborough Park. But again, Orpington is like this sludgy name that covers it's almost like Bromley, but Bromley's the borough, but again, it's sludgy. Like, Orpington is like this town, but kind of lots of places have been kind of subsumed by it.
Okay.
And within that, there are places like Chelsfield and Knockholt that are like very posh villages. And then there's a place called Farnborough, and Farnborough Park is where like incredibly rich rappers move to. There
Okay.
are houses there that are like £10 million.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like golfers live there.
Right.
And it's a gated community, essentially, that was built about 100 years ago. And what's weird is I can't tell you how I am not from that. Like, my parents, like, they did buy their house, but then it all got complicated when my parents split up, and then and it was like just a semi-detached, quite small house, but like it's much more. I can't really it's just not a rich place, the bit we lived in, and then my step parents were from like even more like even less like more deprived places. And this is what it's like. Is like where I'm from, there is loads of deprivation and hardship, but it's sort of not in a city. So it's not really noticed. And Kent is like this. Kent is such extremes of wealth and poverty, but it's so kind of prissy with it that all of the people who don't have anything are just kind of expected just to sort of, I can't...
Like hide
almost. So...
And is that because they're hidden in sort of suburbs or out of town centres or
kind of estates,
right?
Off of things. But so where I'm from is more just like a bland suburb with some bits that are really hard or were really hard at the time. My little road was quite sweet, but then down the road it was like, that's the tough road. It was like weird like that.
Yeah.
So we weren't like, I think...
And this is in Orpington.
In St Mary Cray. The borders, poverest. But it's so funny because then up the hill in Petts Wood you have these mansions, and then down the road in Farnborough you had this gated community. And I went to this school where you had to pass a test to get in, and people used it quite often as like a private school by the back door.
Okay.
Because it was such a good school for academics. At the time it was like the number one state school, right?
Right.
So I was very lucky to get in. But actually looking back, I'm like, there were so few people from my socioeconomic background there. There was so few people who like didn't have money, and I didn't really realise, because the two friends I had were sort of... I had more than two friends. My closest friends were kind of from similar-ish backgrounds to me, slightly more money, but maybe it's not important. They weren't from like rich backgrounds. They were from kind of middle-class backgrounds. Mm-hmm. But then every now and again you would go to a party with like kids from the wider area, and it would be in Chislehurst or Farnborough Park, and you'd realise that someone had driven you down a road to fucking Hollywood style mansions. Like I really remember there was this guy, so we had like what we used to do really, I'm like 16, 17. So when we were like 13, 14, we went through a phase of going to nightclubs, and me particularly going to nightclubs on my own, which now
like unders.
No.
Oh, okay.
And now I look back
Overs,
and I'm like, that wasn't safe. That wasn't safe at all. But I had like a lot going on at home, and so I used to just go off on my own for like days sometimes, and stay with my boyfriend all the time. But by the time we were about 15, 16, we met these boys outside a gig in London, because we'd always like go to music gigs, go to nightclubs. 13, 14, it was like our big thing. But it meant that by the time we were about 16, we were kind of tired. So we met these boys outside the Astoria, RIP, in heaven now. And they were like, you're from Orpington, we're from Orpington. We're like, what? And they went to Darwick Wood, which is the school my sister went to, which is a normal school, but quite a nice school, really. And although she might debate that. And basically, we met them and just started going to get stoned with them in Orpington.
Yeah,
so we're like, I
sure.
can't be getting the train to London. I can't be going to Rock Scene every weekend. It's too much, you know. Yeah. And there was a guy who used to sometimes get stoned with us, and he was a twin, and he had this party at his house, and it was his stepdad's house, and we showed up, and honestly, I couldn't believe it. I was like walking around this kitchen island, like, what the fuck is this? Yeah. It was wild. Yeah. So yeah, it was a very odd correlation. And like, the house I grew up in till I was 12 is the sort of house that nobody my age in London could now afford unless they were multi-millionaire, you know? It was probably worth £900,000 now. Mm. And it is a small 3-bedroomed semi-detached house, you know? Not small, but like normal, not big at all. Yeah. And then when I was 13, my parents had broken up, and they had to sell that house. We moved into this flat that was like a 2-bed new build flat, and it's like there's a quote in I think it's Crime and Punishment, but it might be Notes from the Underground. I'm just a very literary person, and it's like, low ceilings and cramped basements crush the mind and destroy the spirit. And I was like, and I think it's one of the reasons I love being in Glasgow so much, is like I step into my home and I'm like, I'm so tall, and I know it's cold, but it's fucking incredible. You feel like you're in a cathedral, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then this flat, it was like low ceilings, and it was so, and like I guess I carry that to this day. Like I fucking hate bad new builds that are built with no love.
Mm-hmm.
But like it was so small, and
You talk about new builds in the show.
yeah, like I'm dealing with a lot from my past at the moment. But you'd go in and there'd be my room on the left. Then for a time, quite a long time, we didn't have a living room because my stepsister lived there too. So, and God bless my mum, because so it'd be like my room, and then it'd be like the living room, but it's like my mum and stepdad's room, my stepsister's room, the kitchen, the bathroom, and the boiler never worked ever. So you'd like never be able to just rely on the fucking hot water, you know. And everything had a frosted glass door.
Right.
So like, no, my room didn't, but my parents' room, which was my stepsister's room, the living room, the kitchen, the bathroom didn't. So there were two that didn't.
So you're just seeing like blurs all the
Yes,
time,
but also
and so
the sound. And this is where like neurodivergence, I could just hear them. My stepdad would wake up. My stepdad was a labourer, so like my stepdad would wake up at like 5:30 in the morning, and I would hear them, and it would wake me up. And at the time, didn't know about silicone earplugs. If I'd have known that, that'd have been fine. And I would just hear them talking, hear them having uncordial conversations sometimes, and you know, that stress of that. And like, it was just such an intense environment, that smallness of it. And yeah, I think then I left home when I went to university. I came back for a little bit in the first year, but after that I was sort of away. And what was funny was renting in London, in the housing, as it got worse. When we first moved to London in 2003, initially we moved to a place in East Acton, which I told all my posh friends from uni that we shouldn't do. And then eventually we moved to Peckham, which I had advised initially. And we stayed in this beautiful big house. It did have rats. Life is life, you know. But it was big, and we had a spare room. We had these big rooms, and it was similar, you know, the ceilings and stuff. And the rent was cheap. And then basically over the 2003, I left in 2020. So over the 17 years, it was like every single move, the place got smaller and more expensive.
The ceiling's getting
the
ceiling's getting lower.
Yeah. And it was so brutal like that. And I really, really felt it. Like the last place we lived before we moved up here, it was that same feeling of the walls are paper thin. I can hear everything. It's a tiny new build. The ceilings are low. And I guess it was very reminiscent for me of like a hard environment.
It's like
So that was a little speech.
The feeling. Try not to use the word trauma, because just living in a small place, but in your system is like coming.
And I think some people love it. Like some people are like, oh, and I sort of love. I quite like a small bedroom. I like feeling cozy in the bedroom. You know?
Yeah.
But I don't. I love feeling perhaps that I am worth something.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's what I love about tenements in general. And I know I'm not being naive to think that like they've always been great, or it always means that. But as it stands,
no, because like that's traditionally like a bed recess where there would have been a bed
and loads of families in. I know.
Yeah.
But at this very moment in time, it feels like some ordinary, and I also appreciate that I've had like showbiz money and opportunities and stuff, but it does still feel like there is this quality of life that comes from living in them at this moment in time that can often be fucking great.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're a Londoner.
Sort of. It's so interesting. I used to do stand-up, but maybe it's because but I used to do stand-up about this, but I never quite got it. But basically, Orpington is Zone 6. It used to be Kent. Then Thatcher ate it into London to kind of tip the balance. And it's why Borough of Bromley, Borough of Bexley are why Boris Johnson won the mayoral election.
Okay.
Because they're sort of London in name only in lots of ways. And I would say it's like not nice enough to be in Kent and it's not cool enough to be in London. It's just sitting in the middle waiting to die. And I used to feel that way. And I sort of do. I feel like there's this ring around most cities called the Donut of Death, where people are near enough to the city to sort of pretend and go in every now and again to make trouble for people. But they're further enough away that they sort of don't really share the values of the city and that they don't really want to participate. So if you ever do a gig in Maidenhead, no offence, you die, the Donut of Death. If I do a gig in Bromley, I don't know anymore though, but then demographics change too. Like what's been interesting about my lifetime with London is how much it's completely changed who can afford to live where and what that means. But yeah, it's sort of a bit London. I used to get the night bus home and I was in a little group as a teenager that we just were like, Ormondon is boring. We hate townies. We don't want to be a townie. We want to be like grungers. And that means we're going to town on the train. And so I was like, I'm never learning to drive. That's so boring. I'm getting the train to town. And music was a big thing for us. And going to Soho to like be near sex shops was like, we're like, oh my God, they sell poppers.
Yeah.
And going to gigs and clubs, that was a big deal. It was a massive part. And then when I was about 15, I started going up and doing stand-up gigs there. So I very much felt that I wanted to be in central London. I did not want to be in the suburbs. And I did not want to be in Kent. And weirdly, everyone else in my family was like, we're too close to London. We got to get into Kent.
Yeah.
So now they're like all rooted deeper in Kent.
Yeah.
And I just have such a conflicted feeling about the whole place because there's so much of it that I felt I was always bashing my head up against this sort of... It's a very small C conservative place. My school was like, they would literally say, you know, Newstead girls don't become secretaries. They have secretaries. Like they wanted us to be fucking bosses. You know, it was like quite a Tory factory, you know? And so it's like, that was definitely the values of it. I was brought up quite Christian. The church was a big thing. So all these like very conservative things, I felt very bored, very stressed. It didn't feel like there were many places that were connected to art or, you know, and the library was a big thing when I was a kid, but it just didn't feel, it felt like, there's nothing here. And we're just getting drunk in the park.
You know, growing up being like, the library should not be, it shouldn't be like an inspiring space. It's an essential, it's a fundamental, and you take it for granted, and then it's at risk. But you're not looking at a library like, oh my God, this miracle like oasis in the middle of my area. You want to be looking at something a bit more specialist or.
And also, where I'm from just doesn't have much nature. Like we used to go and get stoned in this nature reserve called High Elms.
Okay.
And I remember that really blowing my mind at about 17 to be like, this is
in England's Garden.
Well, but it's not like we're like the fence, the back fence, you know.
I see. Okay.
It's not
sure next to the back fence onto London. London's on the other side.
And London's the other side of the fence. But also, like, I think there were some beautiful. There were mansions up the road, but I never went to them. I never didn't really think of them. There was a wood up the road from me. My family weren't really into nature, so I just didn't realise that I was missing that until I sort of got older and was like what I love about Glasgow is.
There's so much green space.
You go out a bit, but also you go out of the city 20 minutes in a car and you're out, you know, get on a train, you walk up a fucking beautiful hill, swimming in lochs, like stuff like that I never had. And I loved swimming. So there was that element of it that felt really, and I know this is not to be rude to people who live there and love it, but I fucking hated it. I hated it. It felt pathetic and boring and nothing. It just felt nothing. It felt pointless. And anything that was good there, like they have loads of Roman ruins, and down the bottom from where I lived, you'd go down the hill and there was sort of marked out by a corrugated iron fence the ruins of what had been a Roman bathhouse.
Okay.
And it was technically preserved, but it was just in this little fenced off green bit because nobody had the money or care to do anything, you know. And there was Crofton Roman Villa, so there's one by Orpington Station, but it was like this place was built on some beautiful Roman outpost, and no one gives a shit. And I used to blackberry pick. There used to be a bomb site next to it, like which again had been left for fucking 40 years. I was born in the 80s, but like eventually that became paved over these tiny new build houses, you know, right next to this thing. And there's just something about that always sticks with me. I'm like, it wasn't a place to my mind where culture was at the centre of it.
Yes, yeah, I've got the same relationship with Aberdeen, that the
commerce is at its heart.
yes, and you don't see the money going into culture, and if people are able to all of a sudden become like a lot of people are able to all of a sudden become wealthy, there's no like, well, that means I can go to more cultural things.
Oh,
It's
I'll
like,
build a concert
I'll
hall.
build, yes, yeah, exactly.
Those guys, man. Bring back those guys.
Yeah, exactly.
They'll build the hall, we'll shoot them after.
Yeah. There's none of that.
No.
And also the exact same with the lack of care for like local history. That there's.
It's always like one sweet person whose life's project it is, you know?
Yeah, that I remember going to with my mum and my granddad, sorry. There's a man who's born in the Northeast who's called Thomas Glover, and he's like known as like the Scottish samurai. He was like loosely inspired by the inspiration for The Last Samurai.
I love it.
I think I'm sure he's heavily problematic in some sense, but he's from Fraserburgh in the
What, a guy who kills people with a sword?
but he was sort of involved in sort of the industrialization of Japan, and like the formation of like Honda and bringing beer to Japan and things like that. And he's from Aberdeen, and there's this in the area where I grew up, there's this tiny little house, and it has like a sweeping beautiful garden with Japanese like trees and stuff, and inside his house it's got these like Japanese shogun suits and all these things. You could go to it and get little tours, but then the council stop tours of it, but he's like hugely celebrated in Japan, and there's like a statue to him in Japan and stuff like that. But you're like, but why are we not doing that just because it's already here?
I felt like that about Hagg's Castle. You know,
Okay.
Hagg's Castle that used to be the museum of, I think, childhood. Or
Okay.
In Glasgow, just
Right.
next to Pollok Park.
Right. Okay.
And now it's just a rich person's private house
Right.
because Glasgow Council had to sell it off, or
Okay.
chose to sell it off,
Okay.
whatever, you know. And it's like, we have these riches.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like, well, it's history. You don't need to buy it. You just talk about
have it.
You just it's done. You just talk about it.
Just maintain it.
Yeah, just maintain it. So
But I don't want to be too rude about where I'm from. I've not lived there since
yeah,
I was
I don't want
18.
to be rude about it either. But
And also, here's the thing I'll say about Kent. Politically, it's always felt like such a struggle. It's always felt like I felt in the minority as a left-wing person, even when I didn't know I was a left-wing person, you know. And it's always felt so deeply reactionary in lots of ways. But what I really know is that every single place in Kent has a contingent of people who are so radical and work 10 times as hard. Like, I think about in Folkestone, there's this amazing woman called Bridget Chapman, who's since become a councillor, sadly for the Labour Party. I hope she enjoys that joke, but like, she's incredible. And she set up a thing called CRAN, Kent Refugee Action Network. Like, she devotes her life to activism in the most incredible way. And there are so many people all over Kent. Like, just because in the past they've historically been the minority and it's been difficult, me being like, oh, well, it's just not true. There's like always so much going on. But it's just so hard when you feel you're coming up against this dominance of what I perceive to be like the victory of Thatcherism.
Yeah.
You know? Complete divorce of everybody from any kind of social history. The rich people living in these enclaves of vast wealth, private gyms, obviously I do have membership for a private gym, sue me. But like private country clubs, private schools, private hospitals, and the rest can fend for themselves, you know. Like, I see it as such a place so opposite to Glasgow. Like, Glasgow, I feel like,
why did you move
everybody-
here?
I'm allowed and you can't stop me. I live here. No, I moved here for lots of reasons. I grew up really loving music from here, literature from here, artists from here. So I sort of had an affection for it. And then I started gigging here 2005 as the first time I came with Stuart Lee, formerly of this podcast. And the first time I came up here, I was like, what? and I just loved it. And then it was just this gradual process of like, I met my friend Doug King. We make films together. Historically, we will make another, and we would film them in Glasgow, set them in Glasgow, and getting to know him and Darren, who's my friend who's in the films, and like his group of pals who are technically from West Dunbartonshire, but it's very near, which is a similar vibe, I guess, but no, it's not. It's like
It's in
outer
Glasgow.
suburbs. No, I mean it's like outer suburbs.
Yes, it is. Yeah,
But
yeah, it's
not
outer
because
suburbs.
It has like histories of like great industrial stuff that was taken out. Like, yeah, it has a more interesting history. And it has a place called Solidarity Plaza. Like, I didn't fucking get Solidarity Plaza, Pablo Neruda Park or whatever. But oh God, I'm so going on.
No, this is the point.
So I met Doug, we made films together, and I also dated someone from Glasgow, which I don't think we really had a great time together, but I loved being in the city, and I loved everything he would like tell me, even just learning slang, learning like Scots words, like learning about the city, visiting different parts of it. I loved it. He lived in Edinburgh, we would come through, and like all the bands at the time that I knew, lots of them were Edinburgh based, but like meeting Glaswegians, it's pathetic, but I just love the place. And then with finding out more about like the history of it, finding out more particularly about like Red Clydeside, social history of it, and like your romanticism of it is meeting like your reality of like it, and then you're finding out, oh, this is aligned with me politically, as unlike Orpington. You're just like, well, I can. Orpington is like Glasgow if only Rangers existed. Do you understand? Sorry.
That's England. That's kind of England.
Yeah.
Well, that's England.
I'm sorry.
You have, yeah, you
nice
have
guy.
that. It's England.
Yeah, exactly. But like, here's the thing. I basically, what I feel with people in Glasgow is like, people sort of take for granted that their grandparents or their great grandparents were like around with Jimmy Reed or whatever, or like 100 years ago around with fucking John McClane, you know, the rent strikes, all that shit. It's like, it is people's genuine history. And it's
I didn't know there was a guy in the rent strikes called John McClane.
Do you know John McClane?
No.
Fuck,
The only
he's
John
a good-
McClane I
he's a
know
good
is
man.
in Die Hard.
Oh, you did?
That's Bruce Willis's character.
Yeah, is that
named.
Bruce- I
Is
hope
he
it's
named after a?
He was like a very, very wonderful communist rabble-rouser organiser in Glasgow 100 years ago. My friend Henry Bell, the communist poet, wrote an incredible biography of John McClane. Out now in paperback.
In this area,
Yeah.
there's a blue plaque where Mary Barber lived, because you'll see her outside the subway.
Yes.
Which is cool. So yeah, stuff like that
Then
is.
also, I would just come up and like every time I'd be here, I'd be like, it's so funny. Like every time I go to Glasgow, I'm really happy, and then I go back to London, I feel really stressed, and it doesn't make any sense. And also, genuinely, I wanted to have my kids here. I wanted to raise a family.
A quality of life that
Quality
you're talking about, yeah. And well, yeah, it seems
Why did
quite
you come to Glasgow?
clear, because I wanted to do comedy, and also like I liked Glasgow, and had exhausted what I enjoyed about Aberdeen, and there wasn't a comedy scene there that would enable me to like keep doing stuff. I'd just be excited when, you know, people would tour in Aberdeen. So thank you very much for coming to
The Lemon Tree.
coming to Aberdeen.
Shout out to the Lemon Tree.
Shout out to the Lemon Tree, of course.
I also realised that like I'm very pick me to like Glasgow people, because I'm like, I actually love Glasgow though. I'm not like normal English people. I'm not like just English people who move up. Like I actually love Glasgow. It's so embarrassing, but I can't stop.
But then there's a lot of there's lots of English people here. But you do that in your stand up. You're very self aware of being like a person an English person in Glasgow and stuff like that.
But
Which
also,
is
if I'd have moved up, like when I first wanted to move up, which was nearly 15 years ago, I could have just had a bit before. I feel like it's become more of a thing of like, definitely since the lockdown, you know. And I feel like I could have got 10 good years in of people sort of not having as much of like a stereotype going, you know?
Yeah, Stuart Lee even talked about that. I remember we're doing a work in progress like just soon after post-COVID, and he would be like, oh yeah, like, you know, talking about doing impressions of people in the audience, just like, yeah, we moved up here, you know, after the lockdown, you know, blah, blah, blah.
Rude.
So What is the last couple of questions I'll ask you before
I'm
we
sorry
let you
that I
go
have to go.
is what is a home comfort to you?
Oh yeah, I was really thinking about this, trying to work out what I would say, and I think for me, it's just having my home. Like, I know it sounds silly, but like, this is the first time in my life I've bought somewhere, and I want to leave it in my coffin. Like, I love going in and being like, this is still my home. And my kids' room. I love my kids' room.
Mm-hmm.
I love having a big kitchen with a kitchen island, you know, like the poshos. I just love it being my place. I can't get over it. And again, like going in, shutting the door and the big ceilings and stuff. I love the fact that I've lived there 4 years. Like in London, the most I lived somewhere was about 2. And sometimes it would just be, you know, every year. I've lived there 4 years and I've barely started.
Yeah.
Know? I haven't even really decorated it properly. I've tried. I'm terrible at it. The decisions I've made are so bad. Like I go in and I'm like, the colour, why? But it's like...
Wait until in our bathroom you're still seeing the colour that it used to be underneath the new
Who's got time for 10 coats? Come on. However many coats I need.
But just that's beautiful that you're just letting your guard, that you've had the time to let your guard down and it's, you know, the metaphor, but the literal putting your roots down and feeling feeling that's fantastic. That's really
like
good.
Genuinely blessed, grateful beyond belief that where I live, I have 10 families who are friends around the, you know, within our little block. Basically, there's a park so near me, the library, the nursery, the school, everything's so near. And honestly, I couldn't have dreamed of more for what I would love. Like growing up, it was car culture, and again, I'm writing about how I'm anti-car culture, but it was, you know, with
the bravest possible subject to talk about on
in Glasgow,
on
with
stage.
the fucking motorway. Is that ironic? Is everyone?
No. I mean that's the bravest thing for my personal, I've not tried to ever do it on stage because I think it's
It's divisive. It's like talking about women changing their names when they get married. People fucking hate
it's
it.
worse
Talking
than
about
that.
Botox, anything like that.
It's
people hate
worse
it.
than that. Yeah.
But car culture, the
we
opinion
cannot get
Car
into
culture's
that.
ruined the planet.
I'm anti-car. Yeah, congratulations.
I'm not anti every car ever. I'll tell you my.
But you talk about
I walked
that,
everything, and I feel so lucky. And I love where I live. Like, there's like incredible cash and carry where you can get everything. I love where I live. I love it. I
That's
feel
brilliant.
So lucky.
That's so good.
And so home isn't just my home, although I love my home. It's my community.
Yes.
And I can't believe.
But that is
they're
like if you look, but you're like, okay, I finally have the thing that if I was to look up the definition of what this is what I have, and you don't feel sort of like this isn't what I am. This isn't what a home is supposed to be. I don't have the physical space or community and things like that. So. And I think that that's a nice note to end on because I think you've discussed your home. You've certainly gone on about home truths of Orpin, and that's a nice positive note to end on. But that's very inspiring for me to talk about to be a bit critical about my hometown.
But also, home as community is such a big thing, and it's something that I think a lot of people don't get to experience as much as they want, and like. I've never been able to just know I'm part of a community and really, really attached to it. I always in London, I would be moving around the same borough, but I just didn't feel like I could. And now it's like, I've barely started. I've started just volunteering a tiny bit. I've started my neighbours building a network with my lovely friends. I've started, my daughter's just at the primary school. Like, it's so exciting to think like, this is just the start, like it will build and build and build. Learning how to be a better neighbour, better community member, better comrade, better friend, all of that stuff is a project.
Yeah.
It's so fucking exciting.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Anyway,
that's fantastic. Before you go, so have you got any gigs to plug? More work in progresses. Work in progresses.
I haven't booked them in yet. I got a couple, I think, next year in Edinburgh. got one in Manchester. If anyone's listening there.
Where's that?
Feel
With
free.
Excess Malarkey?
I'm doing Excess Malarkey and then doing another one through A Lovely Time. in
Oh,
Manchester.
nice, lovely, great.
Yeah. And then I got a couple in Monkey Barrel. Thank you, Claire. My sweet friend who helped sort me out with gigs there. I'm going to be booking in some more, especially in April. I'm going to try not to test the patience. I'm setting up a gig at the Square Park Coffee in Pollock Shields, which you should come down
Exciting.
to. There will be no money, but it'll be loads of fun and very silly. I don't have much going on work-wise at the moment, but I will have more going on.
But you're working on the
Yeah.
show.
Yeah.
You're carving out this. You're carving out this show. Oh, I really look forward to seeing it develop and
Thank you for having me.
seeing the fringe version and seeing the tour version. Thank you so much
You're
for
so kind.
talking about Orpington and writing. That's exactly what the whole
Thanks,
thing
man.
is supposed to be.
Hope
Thank you
it's
so
all right.
thank you so
And,
much.
Yeah, sorry to be giving you little
No. I think that there's the criticisms come with well what can be learned for that, and I think that's just what a lot of people
Also-
crave for, whether they know it or
That's true. And I think also sometimes it's hard to divorce your mental state from the physical place. So one of the reasons I hated Orpington was I was having a hard time in my childhood. Maybe if I'd had an easier time, I wouldn't hate it. you
yeah
know? That is how it is.
with a mansion and
Yeah. If I was one of the
well
mansion guys,
now
I'd
we
like to
now we
live
know
in
that
place.
an island, a kitchen island,
Yeah, exactly.
does
My kids aren't
wonders.
gonna hate it.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you so
Enjoy your
much.
life.